course, we had other names who did important things in ufology, but for some reason, ladies didn't pay attention to UFOs.
Hello, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with another edition of Binnall of America Audio Season 2. It is February 24th, 2007, and this week our guest is Farah Yurdazu, Turkey's first female ufologist. And our conversation really runs the gamut of esoteric material emanating from Turkey. We're covering Turkish history. We're going to talk about underground cities in Turkey, famous Turkish UFO sightings and landings. What is the sociology of the UFO phenomenon there in Turkey? What do the people think? What does the government think? What do the UFO researchers think? Plus, abductions, chilling material here on Turkish abductions. Rumors of Noah's Ark being in Turkey. You know what I'm talking about, those famous rumors of Noah's Ark being on Mount Ararat. Is it true? I don't know. We're going to find out from Farah what the Turkish people think of the rumors of Noah's Ark being in Turkey. Plus, of course, as is the standard here on the program, tons and tons more. International esoterica at its finest here with Farah Yurdazu. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Farah Yurdazu, let me give you a little bit of background on her. Born in Istanbul, at 13, Farah became hypnotic trance medium at Turkey's Center for Metaphysical Study, one of the world's oldest institutions devoted to paranormal research. She went on to become Turkey's first female UFO investigator, author of 4 best-selling books and many magazine articles, and host of her own popular TV show still broadcast throughout the Turkish-speaking world. Now in New York, Farah is bringing her insights to a broader audience. With her deep knowledge of Middle Eastern spiritual tradition and charming no-nonsense manner, Farah is set to become a household name in the West's burgeoning New Age community. Her website is www.farahyurdazu.com, and I'm going to have to spell this one out for you folks, www.farahyurdazu.com. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview was recorded on January 28th, 2007. Farah Yurdazu on Binnall of America Audio, Season 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Binnall of America Audio, and we have a very special guest this week. It is Farah Yurdazu. She is Turkey's first female ufologist. When I found out she was in America, she's come to America, I was very excited because finding out more about what's going on as far as the UFO phenomenon and the study of UFO phenomenon is in other countries. So I was really excited to hear about Farah Yurdazu and wanted to have her here on the show. I think she's just going to explode onto the esoteric scene in the next couple of years. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be talking about her and her work. Farah Yurdazu, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me being here with your listeners at your show. Thank you.
Now, Farah, let's start out first with your bio and the background and how you came upon investigating UFOs in the first place.
Well, in fact, everything started a long time ago than I was born. Everything started in my family, in my mother's family, in late 1800s. My grandmother's father had a close encounter with some creatures, with some beings.
Wow.
And he was a very logical man. How can I say? He was one of the very important mathematics and French professors of Istanbul University in late 1800s. And he was a science man. I mean, he didn't believe in spiritual things or in ghosts or in paranormal activities, whatever. It was a different time. So when he was still a young university teacher, in a very unexpected way, he was visited by 2 beings in his bedroom. And what he describes matches the description of what we know as reptilians. But of course, then they didn't have any concepts such as reptilians or ETs or aliens great. So he didn't know what happened. But he was extremely scared. And he remembers very well that they were, 2 of them, were communicating with him. And they were bipolar, so they looked half human, half animal, but they were walking on their 2 legs, on their 2 feet.
Yeah.
And the only thing that he was very scared, their eyes were reptilian eyes. they had reptilian eyes. And I guess the communication was in a kind of telepathy. And of course, he didn't know how long they stayed with him. Probably he was under hypnosis or something like this.
Yeah.
As he was very scared, he didn't want them. So he tried to send them away.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were leaving, they seemed very frustrated because he didn't accept their visits. He didn't accept the knowledge or the information, let's say, they were going to offer to him, to my great-grandfather. And before they leave the room, they turned back and they looked at him as if, what do you want, or why you are sending us back? And he asked them one thing. Please don't disturb me never again. And they said, from you to 3 generations. Since then, after this incident, in our family, paranormal activities started. His 5 children, 2 boys and 3 sisters, 3 daughters. One of them was my grandmother. They became psychics. They were the first generation psychics. And then the second generation psychic was my aunt, my mother's sister, older sister. She was a very good psychic.
Yep.
And after the second generation, I became a psychic. I mean, I was born as a psychic. Anyway, so I think this visit or this close encounter with some beings changed something in our family. And if they wanted to give something, I guess they gave us this psychic ability, the ability to communicate with the paranormal world, with the paranormal side of the life. So that's why I found myself in a family who were extremely interested in spiritual things, parapsychology.
Yeah.
And of course, when they were practicing spiritual channeling or parapsychological investigation, this is, let's say, 1920s or 1930s in the years, there wasn't such a thing as UFOs. So remember that I am a child. I was a child of Apollo moon landings or flights or missions.
Yeah. And
at the same time, I was watching Star Trek. So it was very normal for me to get involved in UFOs. So this is how it started in a way, basically.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a little bit about your psychicness, because I don't know too many people who are psychic in general. What kind of abilities would you say that you have? And it says here that in your bio on the website, it says at 13, Farah became hypnotic trance medium at Turkey's Center for Metaphysical Study, one of the world's oldest institutions devoted to paranormal research. At 13, that's amazing, like a child prodigy.
Well, in fact, the psychic awakening started when I was younger. When I was, let's say, 5 years old, 6 years old, I was able to have out-of-body travels, astral travels.
Oh, wow.
And it was a game for me. And I was thinking that everybody can do that. But then later, I found out that it is not so easy to do that.
Yeah.
And similar things was happening around me. I was able to hear and see some voices and some images, just like it happened to some other people in my family.
Yeah.
But then, after 12 years old, 13, 14 years old, that's teenager years, are very important for psychics and for paranormal activity. Generally, it explodes.
Yeah.
The psychic ability or the psychic gift explodes. I had a very extremely unhappy incident related to psychic vision. It was a kind of remote viewing, but by itself, I mean. Now, as you know, remote viewing is a scientific mediumship. Yeah. But what happened to me, it was something that I wasn't expecting. So I saw a very unhappy accident. It was happening at the same time in another part of the city.
Yeah.
So after that incident, I started to visit Istanbul's Metaphysical Research Society, which was established in 1930s in Turkey. And still today, I have a very good communication with them. In fact, they shaped my psychic gift under the control and guidance, because it was established, it was opened by expert investigators and real psychics. So I decided to visit them, and I explained them my experiences. During the same time, I started to see my first UFOs, my first sightings, let's say.
Yeah.
So they wanted to work with me. They wanted to study with me. So we had a long time togetherness with them, and they trained me as a hypnotic medium.
All right.
To communicate with the other realms.
Awesome, awesome. Were you successful to communicate with these other realms?
Well, yes. In fact, as you know, last year I was in PLC's paranormal ghost hunting show, Dead Tenants.
Mm-hmm.
So we were a group of psychics. So I was in that show, and we had really interesting investigations there. So, of course, we were in front of the cameras, and I'm talking about myself. I had only one chance to communicate with the ghosts or with the spirits in front of the cameras. You cannot repeat it.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very successful 10 episodes. They were very successful 10 episodes. And in the show, they couldn't show everything because of the time limitations.
Yeah.
So we were visiting the real ghost-haunted places, real families who were suffering from the ghost attacks.
Oh, wow.
And we were staying over there during a weekend. So we were sleeping there, eating with them, sharing their experiences. And of course, we were lucky because we were able to record ghost activity in front of the camera. So this happens.
Let's move on into ufology in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've been here in America for a while, so you've kind of got an idea of what the United States UFO study scene is like. How would you compare and contrast the U.S. ufology to Turkish ufology?
Well, first of all, let me tell you one thing. UFO reality, extraterrestrial visitors, extraterrestrial ancestors, let me tell you, they're always in Turkish daily life. When you look at our very, very ancient first creation stories about the first Turkish tribes and the Turkish mythology, there are so many information about extraterrestrial beings who came from other stars with flying objects. And at the beginning, Turkish nations were tribes, just like native Indians of the United States.
Yeah.
And our origin was Central Asia, just like native Indians of the United States. So we were shamanic. We were shamans. We were shamanic.
Yeah.
Before we became Islamic. So we are sharing the same culture and the same background with native Indians of North America.
Okay.
So I am extremely involved in Turkish ancient mythology and creation stories, because in all creation stories tells you about strangers who come, who descended from stars, and who got married with the Turkish tribes, Turkish people, to create a new nation. The other thing is that it is very interesting and attractive to me, the wolf symbol.
Yeah.
Wolf as an animal was very, very important for Turkish nations, because in some creation stories, during these extraterrestrial visitors, before or after, a wolf appears and speaks to the human beings. Speaks with a voice, as if it's a human. And again, in some creation stories, some Turkish tribes born from the wolves. So wolf is the ancestor of the Turkish tribes. So when you look at today's abduction cases, we see the same thing in many abduction cases. Before or after, abductee or contactee sees wolves suddenly.
Now, what do you think the significance of the wolf is? Would that be a literal sense or some sort of shape-shifting type ability?
Shape-shifting, I guess, of course. I mean, must be a shape-shifting. Because imagine thousand years ago, in a society who are nomadic, they had no information about nothing. I mean, they were living in tents. They only had eagles, horses, and wolves around them.
Yeah.
So the best thing is to shape-shift into a wolf, to communicate with them, to get closer to them, not to scare them. Because a typical reptilian or a typical gray could be very scary for that society. But a wolf is a very normal concept for them, very normal animal, so it was okay. And so in time, a wolf became a sacred animal, a protector. They believed that wolves protect Turkish nation. And one of the Turkish nation's flag was the wolf hat. It is still very important in Central Asia. So the knowledge, the given knowledge is changing the shape, but it's still here.
Yeah.
So all these things brings me to a conclusion that it is not only imagination, it is not only fantasy. There is something because it is in our history. And then later, especially in 15th century, over Istanbul, there are records of very prominent, very exciting UFO sightings.
Yeah.
One other thing that I always mention in the lectures or in conferences or in my articles, the underground cities of Turkey, in the central part of Turkey, which is called Cappadocia, we have an amazing web of underground cities. They are under the ground and they have 27 floors.
Wow.
27 floors under the ground. Only 7 or 8 of them are open to public as a museum. The rest is still closed. They were found in 1960s. Mm-hmm. And the government, of course, started to research them with a group of archaeologists. And it's a huge complex. Today, 3 major of them are very well known. But we know that, the government knows that, the total number of underground cities in Turkey is around 100.
Wow.
And they are dated to 5,000 years ago from our time. And we don't have a specific information about their builders, who made them. All we know, they were made with a perfect engineering. They were carved in the natural rocks under the ground, but they are huge cities.
Yeah.
With houses for families, with town squares and everything.
Now, let me ask you a couple questions here about these underground cities, because I'm fascinated. You've just completely blown me away with this. Why are only 7 floors here open to the public?
Only 7 and 8 of them, or 7 or 8 of them are open to public. Many reasons. First of all, it is very expensive to keep doing this research.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of money because it's a very difficult area. it takes years to open them to be able to go there.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, yes, now today they are open to public all over the world. Every year, millions of tourists, national and international tourists go there. But again, when you go there, there are differences between the ceiling height. Sometimes it is normal, but sometimes it is very low. So you have to walk on your knees from one room to another room.
Yeah.
And in some parts, the floors are linked to each other with stairs. But again, I mean, imagine they were made 5,000 years ago, maybe before. It is not a perfect stair. So, I mean, and they are very old.
Yeah.
And it may be dangerous. For instance, people who have heart problems or pregnant ladies, mothers are not allowed to go there.
Yeah.
Because it may be dangerous. So that's why they keep only 7 floors open to public.
Okay.
Technical reasons, I mean.
Yeah.
Technical and very logical reasons.
And then my other question here about the underground cities before I move on, I could talk to you all day about this, but I want to cover other stuff, is that you say they're like 5,000 years old, but we don't know who built them. Did the people who are studying them discern anything from what they found in these underground cities? Were there any bodies or historical records or anything like that?
Yes. Yes and no. Yes and no. They were found relics from Hittites, but nobody found any bones.
Yeah.
Nobody found any personal objects, archaeological objects. There are no inscriptions or designs on the walls. There is nothing left. Unless some group of people created them, made them, they used them, and then they didn't want to leave anything behind with a purpose.
Yeah.
For some reason, they were very careful not to leave any pictures or any relics or any designs or any symbols on the walls. There is nothing. Definitely there is nothing.
Bizarre.
Yes, very bizarre. It's a very mysterious area. And I know that some investigators, some paranormal investigators had very fascinating meetings and strange encounters down there in the depths of the underground cities. And some people had some close encounters with some creatures. That's another story. But on the surface of this area, it is one of the most busy UFO sightings and landings region of Turkey.
Really?
In 1980s, we had the mass UFO sightings and landings, many landings in that area, in the same area. So if I make you a Turkish map,
yeah,
and if I put stars where we have most of the UFO sightings, that area would have at least 50 stars.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, it is a very, very busy area. So, in general, in our country, in Turkey, we have constant UFO activity time to time. Of course, we don't have UFO sightings or landings every day, but we have often.
Yeah.
We have often, yes.
Here in America, we have, studying UFOs is sort of under the radar. It's not mainstream. It's on the fringe of science. In Turkey, is it the same way? Is ufology on the fringe of science, or is it more okay to study UFOs?
Okay, the lifestyle, the vision is completely different, of course. It cannot be the same.
Yeah.
But in Turkey, when there is a UFO sighting or a UFO landing, or anybody, any individual who has a video camera, is took if recorded UFO activity, you can see this news the next day on the first pages of the most important newspapers.
Wow.
What is the most important newspaper in the United States?
The New York Times?
Okay. Think about there was a UFO sighting today. Tomorrow, it will be on the first page.
Yeah.
In a newspaper, just like
New York Times.
New York Times.
Yeah.
And you could see the same news on the primetime television news. If there's a photograph, if there's a shooting, they will show it.
Yeah.
So the mentality is different. We are very open-minded about the UFO activity. I mean, we know that they exist, they are real.
Yeah.
But this doesn't mean that there are people who are against all this reality. Of course, I mean, not everybody is accepting. For instance, I made many television shows in Turkey about UFOs, and I have been a guest in talk shows or debates, and most of the times we were criticized, the people who believe UFOs, we were criticized by astrophysicists or meteorologists. And one of these told me that what I believe UFO is a firefly in the sky. I mean, so there are this kind of people, of course. But again, press likes them.
Yeah. Press
and media gives what the subject deserves.
Yeah.
So it is different there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, what about the perspective of the government? Here in America, of course, people who are involved in the UFO field, for the most part, think there's some kind of government cover-up of UFO secrets. What's the government in Turkey have to say about UFOs?
Well, first of all, let me tell you this. UFO subject is not a secret in Turkey.
Yeah.
So when there is no secret, there is nothing to cover it up. You know, there is an expression, they say that what is hidden, what is forbidden is sweet, something like this. They say something like this. When you forbid something to your child, he definitely wants to do that.
Yeah.
In Turkey, paranormal subjects or UFOs are not forbidden, are not hidden, so there is nothing to cover it up. So, that's so simple. And in general, in many ways, of course, our mentality, our lifestyle, our experiences are very, very open.
Now, you sort of talked about how the government, there's probably no cover-up there, and how the media is very open-minded. Would you say, and you sort of suggest that the general public's pretty much just open-minded to the idea of UFOs, and it's not as ridiculous.
Extremely. Okay, for instance, if somebody says that I know that UFOs are real, or if somebody says that I had a UFO sighting, that people wouldn't be seen as a crazy or ignorant or something like this, because this is normal.
Yeah.
This is normal. I mean, for us, there is no difference between I saw an airplane or I saw a UFO. It's the same thing. Almost the same thing, not very much same, but the concept is the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think that crazy if somebody says, I saw an airplane in the sky, which is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
Given that there's this openness and the UFO enigma has gone back so long in Turkish history, are there people in Turkey who try to figure out what the UFOs are, or is it just sort of an accepted thing, like those are the UFOs and we don't know what they are? Are there people, and obviously you're a UFO investigator, so are there people trying to come to conclusions about what they are, studying the UFOs?
Well, first of all, we generally, as a nation, let's say, not only me, we think that they are solid. They are coming from another dimension. But of course, there are questions. Are they coming from the future, or are they coming from another parallel universe, another dimension?
Yeah.
So far, it is difficult to give the right answers
Yeah.
Because in Turkey, we didn't have, as far as we know, we didn't have UFO crashes. So when you have a UFO crash, you have a material, a solid material to investigate, a metal or something.
Yeah.
But only having the UFO sighting on the air or only being witness to a UFO landing is something different because you don't have an evidence to investigate in a laboratory. We have many abduction cases, modern abduction cases today.
Yeah.
In Turkey. And in my family there are abduction cases. But we don't have abduction investigators in Turkey. That's the problem.
Oh, really?
Yes. That's the problem. Because UFO investigation and close encounter or abduction investigation are completely different things.
Oh.
But they're different subjects.
Yeah.
I think to be able to be an abduction researcher, somebody has to be qualified in many ways, such as a hypnotist or a therapist or a doctor or something, because abduction research most of the time is involved with hypnotherapy, or psychology or psychiatry, and also with surgery, as you know, in the United States.
Yeah.
So if we are talking about the implants in the bones or in the tissues, who are going to take them out with surgery? A normal plain UFO investigator cannot do that.
Yeah.
So you can be a very good physicist, you can be a very good UFO investigator, but you must be a surgeon or a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
So that's why we cannot get any information in abduction side except the memories of the abductees.
Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about the history of UFO study in Turkey? Like we had in America, we had, after World War II, then all these big names started coming up, like the J. Allen Hyneks and the James McDonald's, Donald Kehoe, and sort of the first generation. And ufology as a science has had an evolution here in America. What's the organized study of ufology? How has it evolved over the last few years, and where is it similar and different from America?
It is very different because, as I told you before, we didn't have a UFO crash in Turkey. So Roswell UFO crash and other crashes changed many things in American ufology and, in fact, in international ufology. So something happened, and the crash happened, the Roswell incident happened, and then it was necessary to have UFO investigators.
Yeah.
That's why UFO investigators decided to be UFO investigators.
Yeah.
People decided to be UFO investigators. It's the kind of, how do you say, demand and there's an...
supply and demand?
Yes. A kind of, because it was necessary. Yes, we had in the past sightings, landings, whatever. But in Turkey, as I mentioned to you before, paranormal studies first started with spiritualism.
Yeah.
Where I learned how to be a psychic medium. Where I was trained, let's say. Parapsychology. But of course, Metaphysical Research Society of Istanbul and Turkey is the number one always. What they did, they started to publish many books. They translated books from English and from French.
Yeah.
For instance, George Adamski's books were published in Turkey by this organization in Turkish many years ago. And it has not, it is not ufology, it is something else, but famous American psychic Edgar Casey, who was known as a sleeping psychic, and he was giving information about Atlantis. He is very popular in Turkey because the same organization translated and published his almost all books many years ago.
Yeah.
So we were learning, reading from his books. And then another group, again in 1970s, a very pioneer very important leading UFO investigator called Haluk Egemen Sarıkaya. I know it is a Turkish name and it may be a little bit difficult to remember him. I'm repeating, Haluk Egemen Sarıkaya. We can call him just Mr. Sarıkaya.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Sarıkaya.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very good investigator. He was an investigator on the location. I mean, he wasn't doing his investigations from his office.
Yeah.
So he was going to the location. And he also started a publishing company, and he started to publish hundreds of books about ufology. So he was getting them translated from English, from German, or from French. And he created a wonderful library, a resource for next generations. So, to me, the most important thing in ufology or parapsychology or in spiritualism, you have to read written text. You must write.
Yeah.
Because the next generations are learning, or they are going to learn from your books.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's why I am very much into writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you write, you share what you know.
Exactly.
Speaking in the conferences is very nice, but how many people can listen to you in a conference?
Yeah.
But when you write, when you leave a book behind you, years are passing and still you are able to share your knowledge.
Yeah.
So this is a very important point to me.
Mm-hmm.
So in Turkey, the investigation is based on the individuals.
Yeah.
Who dedicated themselves to do this very voluntarily without expecting anything exchange.
Yeah.
And of course, we had other names who did important things in ufology, but for some reason, ladies didn't pay attention to UFOs. Yes. It is interesting.
Yeah.
So I decided to, in fact, I started to write magazine and newspaper articles in my early 20s in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I was a university student at Istanbul University in the Spanish language and philology department. So I was learning how to be a Spanish teacher.
Yeah.
So, but meanwhile, I was writing in newspapers and articles, and I published my first book, I guess it was in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very sure. It was a long time ago. So, and before me, there wasn't any women investigators in UFO field. There were some in spiritualism, in parapsychology, but UFOs, for some reason, always was for men.
Yeah.
Just like science fiction.
Yeah.
Science fiction is generally a man's subject, but ghosts or parapsychology is for women. So that's how it happened in my life with my first book. And then I started to speak in television shows, in talk shows, and I made my own television shows. Then I read 3 more books in Turkey.
Wow.
Yes. So now I'm writing my 5th book for my Turkish publisher. It is going to be in Turkish. I'm trying to finish it, but for some reason I cannot. It must be an updated book, but each day there is a new incident, so I'm deciding to include it to my book, and it never ends.